Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. This is the language learning show that you need to tune into twice a week to get your weekly dose of language learning motivation. I answer your questions live. That's what I do. That's why the show exists. I answer your questions about anything to do with language learning. So without further ado, let's get straight to today's question, which is from Kevin.
Hello Ollie, it's Kevin Richardson here. I'm learning Japanese. And recently I started using Fluent U after reading your excellent blog post about it. Now, I started learning the language from a mobile phone advert, which was great, and it was immediately usable by me. But I do find that I prefer learning through songs, and I'm learning Areno Mamade for the Japanese version of Let It Go. I'm trying to sing it more like William Shatner version of Let It Go, because I'm not a very good singer, of course. But one thing I find really difficult is when I know the words to a song is, have you got any tips for how do I re-articulate lines from songs in a normal, typical, everyday conversation? Okay, that's the question I've got for you. Cheers. Bye.
Hey Kevin, thanks so much for your question. And I love this question because songs and music have always been a huge part of my own language learning. I actually went to music college myself, and I studied jazz piano at university. So I've got a strong musical background, and I guess that's why I've always been drawn to music in language learning. The first thing I want to say is, Kevin, I'm really disappointed that you didn't sing, even if it was the William Shatner style. So maybe you can leave another message, and I'll play that in a special bonus edition of the podcast in the future. So those of you listening, Kevin mentioned a website called Fluent U, which is FLUENTU.com, and it's a great website where you can learn language with video. And he mentioned something in there which you may not have got, which is that he started off by learning something from a mobile advert. Now, what he's referring to is within Fluent U, they have all these videos from YouTube, and you can watch those videos, and you can get the subtitles and the translations all given to you beneath the video. And so he was saying that he was watching a video of a mobile phone advert, and he didn't get so much from that. But then he tried a music video, and suddenly, that's when he started to enjoy it. So that's a little bit of background to the question. And it's a very interesting one because I've learned a whole bunch of songs before, and in lots of different languages. And I've always found that it's quite unpredictable whether or not I will actually be able to take the vocabulary from the songs and actually use that in my own conversations. It depends on a few things, but what I wanted to do to start with is just to contrast for you what songs can be like in different languages. So, for example, I've learned a whole bunch of Brazilian music before, bossa nova and samba, and generally speaking, the kind of language, the kind of Portuguese that you get in Brazilian music is fairly true to life. So, in other words, it is the kind of language that people use day to day on the street. Now, Cantonese, on the other hand, is not. With Cantonese music, Cantonese is quite complex because it's actually a spoken dialect. But in the music of Cantonese, most of the time, they're actually singing using traditional Chinese, written Chinese. And so it's not, if you learn stuff from songs, that's not what people will actually speak like in Hong Kong or in Macau or wherever you happen to be learning Portuguese, with some exceptions, but on the whole, that's true. Japanese is a kind of different story. And one of the interesting things about Japanese music is that because Japanese has a lot of what you call stress time to it, so Japanese is made up with lots of different syllables. When Japanese is put to music, you tend to get very odd phraseology, which means people are singing stuff in Japanese in a slightly strange way. You often get the vowel sounds, the u and the e at the end of words kind of disproportionately stressed, and it ends up being actually quite unnatural. And that explains why if you are learning Japanese, you might often find it difficult to understand Japanese music, because you do have, it kind of warps a little bit the pronunciation of the language, and it's nothing like often what it would sound like in real life when real Japanese people are speaking it. So what I'm trying to say here is that songs come in many, many different forms, and it's important to understand, I think, the characteristics of the songs that you're trying to learn in the language that you're trying to learn. I mean, I know English, for example, English music, I mean, there's all different kinds, but on the whole, it tends to be slightly kind of, you wouldn't expect to speak in the same way using the kind of lyrics that you get from songs. So songs in general, I mean, they're excellent to use for language learning because it just gives you this different dimension. It's not people speaking, it's people singing. And melody, when it's set to language, is extremely memorable. It helps to kind of anchor the words in your brain, and it does make it much more memorable. Once you've learned a song, it's incredibly difficult to actually forget it. And I just earlier on today, I caught myself singing or humming to myself this Japanese song that I learnt back in even before I went to Japan, before I knew what any of the words meant. I'd actually learnt it, and I've still got it to this day, kind of 5 years later. The other thing about songs is that singers, if they're good, tend to pronounce words extremely clearly, so they can really, really help you with pronunciation as well. So, all of which is to say that songs are an excellent resource for learning the language, but it's not a given that songs will actually kind of translate into conversation, which is Kevin's question. How can I take the stuff I'm learning from songs and use it in conversation? Well, in the case of Japanese, I think often you're in a situation where the stuff that you're learning isn't really particularly natural language. So you've got to bear that in mind. Songs, they are in exactly the same way that people love Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in the movies, for example, because they speak, they're awesome when they speak. Their lines are some of the best in movie history. But, when was the last time you caught someone on the street speaking like Al Pacino? That doesn't really happen. So you've got to take it all with a pinch of salt. So it's not a given that songs are necessarily the best way of learning to speak. When I'm learning a language, I tend to see songs as more of a tool for discovering the language. I do tend to learn quite a lot of songs, and I find that because the quality of the lyrics tends to be quite good, it tends to be good examples of the language, that you can learn an awful lot about the vocabulary and the grammar of the language by checking out songs. They're also great for impressing at karaoke, of course, and especially, Kevin, since you're in Japan, it's a good idea to learn as many Japanese songs as you can. So here are 3 things specifically that I would do if I really wanted to take the vocabulary from the song and learn it so that I could use it in speech. First of all, I would probably not try to learn the whole song at all. I would identify keywords and key phrases from the song that I've learnt that I then want to be able to use, and I would stick those in a flashcard app of some kind that uses spaced repetition system, something like Memrise or Anki, or the one that I use personally is called Flashcards Deluxe. So I would take parts of the song, I would try to take whole phrases, and I would put them in my flashcard app, and then I would use that app to practice to review those words and phrases on a daily basis. And I would make sure to set the flashcard app to display English first. So when I'm reviewing my flashcards, it displays English, and then I have to then remember what the line is in Japanese. That forces you to not only be kind of passive about it, but to actually say, okay, well, here's what I want to say in English, and then you actually have to actively recall the Japanese. And that's kind of a preparation and like a mini rehearsal, if you like, for when you actually come to speak. The second thing I do is that when I'm having my language exchange or my speaking sessions or whatever they may be, I would take some of that key vocabulary from the song and I would write a little list next to me, and I'd just simply keep it on the table next to me. And I try not to make it too many things, maybe 7 or 8 things at most. And I'd just keep it there, and I'd use it to refer to during the conversation, and I'd just try to sort of sneak it in, elbow it into the conversation a little bit as I'm going. And that seems like a very simple thing, but often one of the problems when you're speaking is that you actually need to kind of remember what to say. So that's a useful trick to help you keep those words and phrases at the front of your mind and actually try to practice them in the conversation. The third thing I do, which is a bit more time consuming, is I would actually take the vocabulary and start to do bits of writing with it. The kind of thing that I like to do is to take words and phrases that I'm trying to learn and to write little monologues or speeches as short as possible, generally kind of under 60 seconds, but to kind of do a bit of writing. It could be creative writing, it could be some kind of self-introduction or something, using the words, the vocabulary that you're trying to remember. So I'd write it out, I would get it checked by a native speaker, either my tutor or online using a service like lang8.com. And I'll put all these URLs in the show notes. So I'd write it, I would get it corrected, I'd get someone to record it then, maybe either my tutor or using a service like rhinospike.com. And then I would go off and I would learn it myself, I'd memorize it. And then what happens is that this is one of the best things you can do to try to really remember and make sure you remember certain items of vocabulary. So three different ideas there for you to try to remember that stuff. What I'd say though is ultimately, given what we've said about songs not being particularly natural all the time, I wouldn't worry too much, and I wouldn't be thinking to yourself, if I can't use all the words from this song in a conversation, what's wrong with me? I wouldn't worry about that at all. I think you don't have to use songs for that particular purpose, and indeed I tend not to, and I tend to use them more, like I said, as a way to kind of discover the language. So, Kevin, brilliant question. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to leave me a question, it's very simple. Simply go over to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask, and that will direct you to a cool little widget where you can leave me your own voicemail question, and I'll do my best to answer it here on the podcast. Now, I'm giving away 3 copies of my video course. My video course is called Language Learning Foundations. It's all about how to learn a new language quickly and efficiently. It walks you through the specific techniques that I use when I'm learning a new language. And I'm giving away 3 copies. I'm doing this to celebrate the launch of the podcast. And if you'd like to be in with a chance of winning a copy, then here's what you have to do. Simply head over to iTunes and search for this podcast in the iTunes store. I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Once you've found it, 2 things you have to do. First of all, leave a star rating. And of course, I'm hoping it's going to be a 5-star rating because, how awesome is the podcast? Only joking. You can leave whatever star rating you want and then leave a review, which includes your name. And then what I'll do is, in due course, I'm going to pick 3 people, 3 lucky winners from around the world, and they will each receive a copy of my Language Learning Foundations video course, which is worth $97 each. So at the end of each episode, I like to leave you with a little something on the topic of the episode, of the question that's come through, that you can take away and explore further. And today I'm going to talk about a fantastic website, one of my favorite websites, called Fluent U. And this is the website that Kevin mentioned in his question. The URL is fluentu.com, which is fluentu.com. And it's language learning with video. If you're a visual person and you like to see people speaking and you like to follow along with videos that are taken directly from YouTube and to have translations, subtitles, even vocabulary, there's a hover dictionary there, so you can hover over whichever word you want. You can then export that to your flashcards. It's an absolutely fantastic service, and I use it on a daily basis to learn Japanese, but they also have a bunch of other languages there. So if you like video, if you like the sound of learning languages with video, then head over to fluentu.com and check it out. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on Thursday for episode 6 of the I Will Teach You a Language podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way, through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free story learning kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit. That's PODKIT to get free access. Inside, you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT. And if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.